Chapter 12. The end. As a few into many more meetings came and left us to remember, I knew that our formal relationship had come to an end, Tommy's eternal brightness emerging so elegantly, he had recaptured his glow. Many pieces of necessary therapy as types, keystones, and revelations had come together and danced harmoniously into a new man. The last session was upon us, and it felt for me as if I was a child again, on my last day of school. I knew he felt the same. His eyes had converted from a raised red, deathly and dark, to an illustrious true hue of hope and prosperous joy. I saw that his demeanor, however, was still stiff from our last meeting. He had not wanted to admit any improvement, the simplicity of the treatment clearly denoting the shallowness of his problems all along. To ease away the denial, his juvenile capitulation, I pulled out a pre-selected note from one of our earlier, less personal sessions. The beautiful complexity of his mind, I announced, obscures and protects, leaving behind the basics of his life. He wants, but can never attain, the humble state of peace. He leers but never pounces. Starved by his neural voluptuousness and crazed by his endless ability, he seeks to solve his desolation with the formations of higher-order perfection. The self-made solution to human self is always hell. Through craft and skill, wonder and passion, he seeks to mend the brokenness of himself and the world. We both then stared on at one another in agreement until I proceeded to read a most recent session's note of importance. He has conquered what he had thought impossible, I continued. The simplest techniques seem to allow for the most fundamental healing. Through prolonged exposure and thoughtful psychoanalytic endeavoring, Tommy has identified his areas for growth and moves forward resolutely. The sepsis has been cleaned. Though forever scarred, he is driving through the mist, and the thickest is behind him. I hope, and it seems not ignorant a hope, that he has effectively learned from his trauma, adapting his life. He is actively dismantling the trauma's effects on his present and future. The boy has many fields still through which he must plow. Incredibly, he has outgrown the most manipulative part of trauma, the anger at all for the actions of one or some, the victimhood, the prideful blooming into fôltf a part of the actual whole time and space and freedom and choice and truth and more. An outstanding young man with much to learn, but only upwards to travel, sits before me. Tommy teared up in the most uncontrolled but sophisticated way. The dampness of his sincerity allowed for the approval of my guess. He had moved through his life so cumbersomely, tenacity his only friend. It took all of him to be vulnerable with me, the stripped carcass of his essence picked dry now by the sharing of his most shameful and fearful truths with me. All of it bellowed like a sweet humming as he remained on and on. The boy was a man of greatness, the only thing standing in his way was time. I hoped that the map forward, past his current self, was no longer a hope awaiting, but a flame building. We smiled for a while, in peace. Suddenly, he asked, "How long is this session going to be?" I told him that it could be as long as reasonably required for the summation and reflection on such a monumental achievement, his future realigned. It truly was the most pivotal part of his life. He and I both knew that he had rounded the corner onto brighter skies. It was a moment of true harmony, neither of us combative, each just letting the air be breathed as it was meant to be. Over and over, within the stillness, we stirred softly, sighing with relief. It all seemed to be a simple collection of milestone memories, no temporal continuity. I predicted for a moment my own future reminiscence and thought of how drenched in lacking consistency our relationship had been. The timeless quality bit my tongue with imbued intrigue. I pondered how we could have even tracked the progress of such an unpredictable journey. All at once, just after my tongue's ticking in idealized representation of its bitter, as said bitten, signaling had ended, it hit us, the fog of falling folly faintly fell upon my eyes, forcing my hand. I sobbed with him for a while. It was an equally turbulent and peaceful passage for me. From my elusive visions of beasts, and their lessons, to the pensive and unplaced pitfalls that laced Tommy's therapy, I had ventured, I was exhausted. It was archetypal, the story of fear and pain, and the stagnant sadness, followed by the uprising against manifested evil. He was all, everyone had a stake in his calamity. Each step of the process seemed to pull upon the woven wills of the world, one by one, adding in similarity and deriving universality. It was explosive and agonizing, totally unwarranted for such mortal minds as ours. I turned into a full teardrop into rain and back into my eyes as my sob turned to a cry, overripe reverence still not complete somehow. It was neither him nor me for which we as phenomenon had been planned, rather, it was the accumulation of all the men and women who had come before us, and all that hoped to follow. It was simply him and me. I had reached the pinnacle of essentiality in his therapy. Peace and safety. I had especially gifted Tommy with such things. With my own back patting, still not complete in feeling, almost sounding off into the room, Tommy started to talk, interrupting my impassioned thoughtfulness with a line of questions and ideas. Why oppose the irrationality and inhuman touch of the universe, he urgently probed. Even worse yet, why condemn yourself to clinging to the past? I understand the way to be now. Absorb and live life, transgress and trample, and learn throughout the entire undertaking. It is also clear to me why we are here. It is all distance from stability. Like any organism, homeostasis is the primary driving force. Intercepted by the chaos of life, man must adjust. The might of the man is the equilibrium constant, the speed at which he may learn and return to center. We are all here, purposeful or not, right? Regardless of this meaning, or lack thereof, we are all here. I am tired of standing still, it is time to grow. I have been trying my whole life to buy and punch an entrance ticket into life, my gametes I suppose screaming, but I am here and now already and somehow definitionally always. I don't have to buy a ticket, I am already here. Thank you for everything. Tommy and I were finally allied in totality. Not a word of disapproval or disagreement was spoken. I agreed and cheerfully added, remember these things and you are never defeated, only always awaiting your next piece of more, experiential more. Inspired by Tommy's healing, I thought back for a moment on my impedances. The main problem that I had truly never faced was my fear of water. That beguiling fear, left to grow larger than manageable, needed fixing. For a moment, my glee shifted into jealousy of his facile forward growth. With my insides out and again almost audible, I pulled myself back and redirected my focus onto Tommy. Genuinely curious, with therapeutic prudence, I asked, so what is next for you? He proffered a smile and said, not much by way of solidarity. I wish to let the world take me. I have fought to control my life for too long, living to cover up. I wish now to uncover. Travel from the most desolate shores of me to the novel abundant, allowing myself to fall back in love with the world, and hopefully one day extend the same sentiment to myself. This is why I think we are here. That was a most gracious and awe-inspiring message from Tommy's mouth especially. Though dangerously unproductive by way chaotic on the surface, it was exactly the prescription needed to revivify Tommy's barren life. He knew that he could no longer allow himself to fight experiences. Growing from within was impossible, he knew that better than most. Due to his impasse, his planned-unplanned expansion was the perfect remedy for his broken spirit. The vicarious life he had been living before, out from which he had been levered, seemed like a distant conch already now. The air is almost sweet, he continued with a smile, floral, and full of life. The allure of the world never seemed so visceral, so within my grasp. I smile because there is nothing else to do. I have come to this impartiality from pain, awake and alert, but faithful. I hope this is the way to be. Now tingling with invigorated happiness for my young friend, I simply answered, there is no better way to be. I meant that so deeply. As though dredging up my own desire for greatness, I reveled in his glorious hopefulness. In truth, the life he described was all I wanted as well. The saccharine state he savored now had missed me for some time, and it had especially smacked me with another coat of covetous covering as he had explored his desire. Sensing that some please don't beat vile and furtive reasoning within my envious mind was flickering, I quelled some strange serpents within me with a gulp and continued in his praise. I needed to remind him of his tribulations and of their importance in hindsight, consolidated, compartmentalized, but never repressed or fully ignored, pretended ineffectual. I vocalized the importance of his belief. It was always going to be, I said faintly, still fighting myself. You needed only to have faith in yourself. It is all that was required of you. My most difficult but valued patient, from me to you, I say that your self-faith has truly been earned. This is the most wonderful part of it all, you can never go back. Once the seal has been broken, and you have shattered the chains that held you, the truth can never not again set you free. Your dishonest descension into destruction has been dissolved, salvation has been found. Each step you take now is taken through a world you have co-created, not one in which you have been imprisoned. You are no longer a captive audience member, reliving the execrable exhaustion of entrapment. You are free, my boy. It is all I wanted for you to be free. Further uplifted by my vulnerable admittance, he continued gleefully explaining what it all meant to him. Exposing more of his plan, he paused not before imparting his newest ponderance. I wonder how few people, he whispered, looking downwards, are honest with themselves. I suppose very few. I guess we all are, but for acceptance and action. It was the only hurdle to jump for me, and I had focused on myself as my main purpose in life, instead of being earnest and moving forward for the people around me and for me as another person into as the whole. I suppose one can travel through his life without ever really knowing himself. No, that's not true. Running is manifested knowing too. Objectivity, thoughtfulness as neither for nor against oneself, is the most unattainable gift I have come to partially receive. I am so grateful. Now, it is time to add something beautiful to this wonderful world. Attempting to contain the newest wave of tears that befell his glands, Tommy sat in silence once more. A slight chuckle bounded from the quietude, and then he remarked, speaking with friends and discussing what they believe seems now more to be an exercise in futility rather than an exchange of ideas. It seems to me that people are convincing themselves of what they believe more than conversing openly. It's all so unimaginative, so reductive. From God to godlessness, people just want something to which they may bow. Even in this I am self-convincing. I heard that somewhere, no, somewheres. Anyway, perhaps this is why disagreement on our principles and ideals often goes awry. I no longer need this try-on idolization as truth. I epitomized that ethos, nonpareil. It was also pointless, a captivity of creativity I suppose. Stuck once more I was. I jostled in my seat, uncomfortably proud. The delineation of the human masquerade, and the admittance of his own partaking, was a truth most lovely to hear. Therapeutically especially, my temples throbbed with joy. Off was something still, though. I had to know what I was feeling. I wasn't letting me. I shook my head and knew more was to come of the strangeness, now sent to the back of my mind. Slightly troubled by the prospect of his social inactivity, I remarked past my own need to uncover my strange feeling, it is important to remember the importance of growth through reflecting and composing. The need for conversation is extended to all. Even the most linguistically lucky may find themselves inexplicable when attempting to portray a simple intrinsic truth. A cringe rocked my chest. Better yet, the creation of new thoughts may arise in the presence of disagreement. How many men are you, discussing away inside? One may also gauge the universality of their claims through a multitude of simple interactions. All of this is impossible in the absence of connection. From specialized speech to humored humming, we need to test ourselves against the world constantly. Once I had finished my cautious warning, Tommy professed, "Wow, glad I'm not your patient anymore." We both laughed loudly, remembering the confrontational intensity of all the previous sessions. It took a while to settle down from the gleeful hysteria, but after the humorous harmony had run its course through us, we drew stable breath and sighed simultaneously. It had been heavy on us both. The truth's hiding, finding, and escape had repeatedly combined into this remarkable memory for both of us. We had and now shared so much, the giant little of knowing one another. It was all just glimpses of a lost young man and his guide, now both leaving each other, but as with all human things, the beauty was too much for a sentence to. While feeling the moment, a photograph I had taken years before suddenly flashed in my mind. Two hummingbirds, separated by a hibiscus bush, had been drawing nectar from each side of the structure, each participant a piece of something more but taking solely for their own satisfaction. Such a stunning moment was to never slip fully from sight, and so I had snapped my picture. Even though the hazy picture was encased in memory, it was too much too for dry eyes. Sensing my overwhelmed aura, Tommy shifted from the connectivity of our silence. "A couple months ago," he remarked, "I saw the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. She had no left arm. Smiling, she walked about the park and peacefully paced, inexplicably free. I couldn't explain the instant connection. It was not some vapid sexual arousal, it was so much more. I felt her shame and her loss, the removal of normalcy, its replacement with discomfort. I couldn't understand why. I had never leered at a lost limb, never cried for normal physical prowess. I could not conceive actually of such ineptitude. That moment had been such a confusing memory. Now though, after learning of my true self with you, I understand. I have lost something too. I lost the connection with normalcy without perturbing any of my protuberances. What that man did to me, it can never be erased, it is as unhealable as that woman's loss. We both move through time gracefully misunderstood. I have come to appreciate this. I can only live on and adapt. I knew the gravity of Tommy's progress had not missed him, and so I decided not to counter with a disclaimer of danger and stagnation. He was apt enough already to precatch any potential lurking lamentations as he grew anyhow. It was riddled with inaccuracies, but the ruling theme remained intact. It was highly poignant but beatific, his metaphor. It was never about the regrowth of his burnt psyche. It was about the acceptance and closure of it. He quickly added more to the presentation of his thoughts, saying, I just imagined that stunning woman, battling through everyday chores. It drove me to pitiable sadness. The image of such a graceful and glorious woman fumbling for a frying pan, stretching over sauces, and cutting cautiously, her arm totally prohibited from aid, it drained me. It sank me into a realm of empathetic chaos. I wondered about her for so long that it once became my day. All I wanted was to force some ease upon her. Force life to be something it is not. The worst in me used the best in me to try and justify resentfully playing God, as they say. Tommy smiled hard. Then it all sank in. The absent arm didn't define her. She still rose and fell at the same rate, gravitationally consistent. Her life was not circulating around her one inadequacy, she had surely moved long ago. I saw her again recently, smiling brighter than most. She enacted vibrant valor in her own way, passing the time voraciously. Her hunger inspired me. I slowly approached her, heart pounding with anticipation. Beginning to panic, I looked keenly at her wedding ring. A cool wave of ease passed over me. Shifting from my poorly hidden from myself primary objective, I asked for a moment of her time. She agreed and we talked about her life with and without the arm. She had lost the arm due to frostbite as a young girl. She spoke of the process of accepting life for all its truth and freedom, and I felt more and more like a child with each word of hers. There is so much to her story, but that's all for another. Tommy troublingly but tacitly decided something. I love her already, you know. Why is my heart so soft and instantly ever full, but insecure? Oh, how we know but still, so much life, is there. How do I love people so much? Why the me? And, see, I just want what I cannot have without a life of acceptance and painful growth. Anyway, back to the lady. I praised her strength and vitality, and we went our separate ways. I wish I could have more compellingly compiled my admiration for her strength. I did what I could. She deserved all my true acclamation and whole heart at that moment. That's how I felt. I feel more and more comfortable in that nowadays, I guess. It filled me with so much joy to share even a part of my happiness for and with and because of her. You ask what's next for me? More moments like that would be lovely. I chokingly replied, it seems that you're truly on your way. With the remaining time, I would like to summarize what you have accomplished from my point of view, as a psychologist. The most appropriate path forward in the ailment of your disorder must also be assessed. Maintaining his positive composure, he implored me to continue, awaiting more hard work. Fulfillment had become the greatest treasure to him, uninterested in more temporary or comfortable growth. I thought long and hard before answering. While our dynamic therapy, I exalted, mainly focused on prolonged exposure and objectivity training, it must be said that you have allowed yourself freedom. This is the psychological alleviation that most victims never find. You should be a grateful man, walking out of here, not for me, but for us as an opportunity. Be grateful, Tommy. You took your issues, and you faced them. You have turned your past from foe to friend, learning along the way. I tip my hat to you, Tommy. As far as continued, self-administered care, you may investigate narrative exposure therapy, or NET as a joking tone swallowed any of my silly pride, professionals like to call it. There is a wonderful group that meets on Mondays at the Trinity United Methodist Church. These group meetings can extend the healing and help you regain more of what you have lost. Remember, this is all a process. Enjoy each igneous step along the way, otherwise the most time-intensive part of your life will be filled with resentment. There are a couple more resources in this folder here. There is also an EMDR professional in here, but I need you to remember what we spoke about regarding the technique. With all my vocal ambling enabling safe passage as slow surging into a great moment to emerge, I handed him my favorite folder, filled with flyers and notes and truths and things. As I handed it over, I reminisced on how I had come to possess such a beautiful work of stationary art. It had been my father's. He had made 10 Ashobana folders, crafting them each and all uber skillfully, by hand, indelibly marking his grace into reality. He had been such a tough man, but his floral folder fabrication was his truest truth, his delicate craft. That antithetical relationship meant the world to me. I had been gifted one folder by my father after years of begging and pleading. I remembered my father's face as Tommy touched that florality. I remembered how he, fearing that I would disrespect his creation, had begrudgingly handed me the folder, warning thrice of the consideration that it necessitated. I'll never forget what he said that day though, long after his warnings had faded. He stated clearly, "This is who we are, boy, you can be more than yourself. It represents my life, my piece of peace. I love you, son." I had felt like such a lucky lad in that moment, the crowning jewel of my father's misunderstood passion in my hands. The memory surrounding the folder and the folder itself were all I had left of him, still compelling respect. Tommy had not only earned my respect, but he had also been an integral part of my growth and healing. With all my humble pride and happiness filling my mind, I freed the folder, our patriarchal pattern set. As the folder flowered upon Tommy, I felt a release. The unwhole feeling that had plagued me in that meeting especially suddenly began to lift and then sank and stuck itself in my throat. I swallowed the knowing failingly. My mind clapped and my bones rattled in excitement. The grasp my father still held as my own tri-grip over him by way forced misery lived as Russian spite reviled to life, oh my life, seemingly disappeared for a moment, and truth began to fill me again. I smiled, aware exonerated from nothing but what was to come, by the presence of now. Blood sun boom. Blood sun apex. It took me half a century, I mumbled, mind back on the folder directly, and combat with a genius, to free myself. Tommy felt the shifting mind in front of him and respected my space, not asking for clarification. It was a wonderful and confusing exhilaration. I couldn't stop fidgeting, uncomfortably comfortable in my selfish removal of the dead weight. The folder had been the ultimate symbol of my familial baggage, unnecessarily unfixed and fixed to me before that moment with Tommy, where it had finally been cut free. Graciously, Tommy thanked me for the gift and silence fell on us again until he decided that he wanted to zoom back out into abstraction. He wanted clearly to compel less exact, hence less, potential disappointment by way future failing, mitigating the damage of his hopes shifting into soured our thought true denouements. I wish I knew what I meant by breathe in the world, he added. Perhaps what I meant to say is that I want to find my passion. What is passion? I still don't exactly know. It seems to be so easily conflated with, or just is, a mixture of coping mechanisms solidified into unified action, directed properly. It's all so wonderfully unknown. What is passion? Well, actually let's not get into it. My obscure personhood identified immediately with what he was doing and why. Spoken words were the way for him, any mutual fog still too unsure for his hurt and healing heart, to remark as demarcate an impossible end, actually come. It was the strangeness and force of a beginning as we were supposed to be ending that prelingered. Oh, how things can prelinger. My mind bounced at the truth, the special oddity of wanting there to only be what he had terminally said, and both of us agreeing to it, just for the sake of the refused awkwardness of starting anything all over again, no matter what or the falsity. I knew we were in one another's minds as I sloppily thought, it's as if someone had said something and I hadn't heard it and the sayer registered my non-comprehension, but we both refused the truth but both of us knew it and both knew we were refusing it. Oh, how the most accomplished, unashamed, awesome king quivers too at such awkwardness. We both smiled. I then thought about the question, dedicating newly most of my thought to otherly why he had restructured his initial sentiment. Finally reaching some semblance of a real answer, I responded, saying back, a passion is something that pulls you from thought. It is something that, when enacted, allows us freedom from the consistent pain of humanity. All our problems seem to fade in the presence of such an integral action, passion. We plug into the greatness of humanity with as passion, untouched by individuality as wholeness. Perhaps you can call this coping, or you could simply enjoy your occasional home outside of yourself. Maybe the true reason for your hesitation to indulge in a passion is that this passion would connect you, in an indirect way, to normalcy. The normality from which you have been striving to erect yourself isn't escapable. You know how like everyone you are, how you too are lower than everyone, how your heart howls with transgression, but your pride tries to, see, we've been over this, and now my own pride is grumbling over overindulgence in rapidity, and your face says it too. We both laughed. The distance, I continued, between you and the next man seems to be shrinking, Tommy. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. After all, we all keep on living, finding solace from our sadness, striving for more, being okay with missed achievements, and allowing for fun. The common man has many admirable qualities. Unexceptional as most are, much happiness can be found in your contribution to the average. He seemed incredibly happy with my answer. Unquestionably satisfied, forgetting the crick in our enacted sociality just before, strained by our megavondum hyperconsciousness, as he had once called it, his eyes reflected his relief in the realization of man's inherent adequacy by mere existence. He had placed so much pressure on himself, unable to move, writhing under his own thumb for so long, that weight was lifting from him, my office lighter with each breath still. Once the absence of sound had filled our space for long enough, Tommy chuckled. After a brief span of innocent giggling, he took out a weathered piece of paper from his pants and read something lovely. The crepuscular rays ravished the clouds' red radiance, he proclaimed. They pierced the prayerful perches, this powdery palace prodded only by twilight's powerful poker. This presentation propels me through some portal, a royal passageway. Peering through the key's port, the pompous prince percolates with pride and pounces over his priceless pen, his pristine plot. What a bet it is! Now serious, Tommy looked up from the paper. As his head swivel up lifted, no, rather up swivel lifted, his eyes and face sank. He explained the passage, adding, it was the start of my letter to the little boy, the one I couldn't save, we couldn't save. I had started writing it after our trip to the botanical gardens. No, before this. This letter, I had thought that it would be enough. I knew it wouldn't be. I was going to write to him about the misconceptions of life and greatness, write him a story. It was to be glorious. When you told me he was gone, well, I gave up on it. I was so transfixed by the beginning of the piece. It was such a beautiful start, so unassumingly poetic. It had started not as a literary start at all, and surely these are the best exhibits of life. It is a true truth as living as flowering, a writ transference. I thought though that some rational growth could come from our pain. I thought that, in some small way, evil could be muted by good, by thinking, annihilation through alliteration, I suppose. I see how blind I was, how fruitless a pursuit it was. A powerful stride in the wrong direction. I am back in the realm of normal men, taking meager steps loudly. Taking meager steps loudly, I continue. With the tone quickly shifting, I implored him to lose his nihilism. Earnestly reassuring him, I said, don't allow the past to restrict the future, learn and grow. You are creative, so create. Your music, philosophy, objectivity, they are not all pointless wanderings, and let us definitely not restart that discussion. Remember, a mere metamillimeter of metaphysics accepted is an acceptance of the greater than this here now whole thing by necessity, as any consciousness as moreness has to then include this spacetime consciousness at least, and so must be more total and you get it, got it the first time, so back to you. Your mastery of that magnificent mark, P, alliterated, might be a manifestation of malicious manliness, or maybe just meteoric morality, awaiting. We both shuddered in new hurt for the awkwardness of my failed ending especially dry, for M alliterated. We shared a grievous chuckle until he reared his benevolence once more, adding, I do really think it's beautiful, boisterously bright and unbutchered. A communal cackle commenced. We laughed the laugh of life as absurdity sometimes. For it is enough any time, he seemed to say as I knew into agreed. We sat in our pointful stupor once again, recovering from the underlying Weltschmerz, at the very least, Tommy had evoked, until Tommy rewound his profundity to an earlier conversation, felt unfinished. His pensive brow returned to his face as he collected his thoughts. Tommy announced, your transactional theory, I have found some anecdotal evidence that has shown me the importance of such a lens. Minimizing our decisions, to reflect our biologically derivative thought processes, is a brilliant upheaval. I have a friend, he is the mildest man you will ever meet. He is constantly people-pleasing, addicted to superficially, clearly to me, falsely seems subverting his own will to power. I thought about the theory and how he fits. So clear is his game now, and the weird feeling I always have around him. It was always clear, but before it was a mess of thought. You framed a feeling and a knowing, I guess, outlined a streamlined translation frame of, for, truth. Anyway, there's again that fractal truth requiring endless talk and acquaintance, but for us refusing rebeginnings because of the calmness of austerity as the denial of our jagged plans and silly mistakes as perturbances of our pride spiked but not pierced and killed unless we let it be so that you were thinking, we were thinking. To say, another session, is to admit that we are always or never here, that we're both guessing and always in need, that we need one another, that we have to pretend something, that we couldn't possibly say, I love you, and am sorry for you and myself mostly, always forever, and I'm stupid and have made a mistake, I make mistakes. The truth, damn it, the truth, that's what we were feeling earlier, almost let slip, out it comes between us, and then, oh no. Tommy pointed up, a devilish smirk riding and writing blood bellows below his nostrils. I blew it again, didn't I? You should write, then we laughed. They're in your notes, come on now. I mean, next to the suns you drew. Use your glasses, swim in them. Your eyes, the eyes. Blood sun what again, rising, revealing, about to. Tommy, come back, seemed to say my blink. As though I had just arisen from the odd state Dolly knew well, his key ding-fong, clank-bang dangling beneath drooped hand, sonorously stuck in skull, punctured like can, I returned to Tommy staring at me in the brief awaiting silence of conversational sentence breaks broken just too long by something. Oh, my something. I first wondered, he continued, my phasing back into his story, clearly hence my outing from attention, bothering him not enough to not continue, how such an overt and constant serotonin depletion, a seemingly selfless set of actions came to be his modus operandi. I then applied your theory. His acts of shy tenderness are simply enacted for others to view him as non-threatening. This bleak anti-masculine approach is a metatransaction. The atomized, prototypical transaction is as follows: he gives up his already hollowed might and receives the sanctity of cowardly, shadowful niceness safety. This safety is complex though. This safety not only frees him from any physical or mental combat, but it also shields him from needing to prove that his might, so easily traded, remains steadfast. Thus, after the enormously repetitive iteration machine called life has had its way with him, he is left as an ineffectual but nice person, or breaks, turns to true monster, realizes fullness awaiting pre-acceptance fullness, and lives, tries love perhaps, bows to God perhaps, allows life to flower. You are right, no matter how twisted or incognizant, we are all transactionally self-serving. And then he switched to a joke, you should write that somewhere, but not really, that too. We all know to hide your good deeds, but should I hide that I'm hiding my good deeds, or that I'm perhaps hiding my hiding of good deeds or? Amazed by the distinct clarity of his perception regarding his own friend, I breathed in deeply and replied, yes, that all seems to add up. Repulsed by his plainness though, I recapitulated the intended effects of the theory. I need you to remember though, there is goodness in the self-serving nature of people in that, when allied with a robust and consistent moral framework, people can all win. It is like the most basic economy, beneficial for both parties. A mutually advantageous system is usually the outcome if people are gifted with total freedom. Due to this intrinsic truth, you can understand that an attack on what a free market has become is an attack on the corruption degenerating the flowering of the freedom that maximizes systems as an outgrowth, the historically cyclical movement away from the fundamental precepts truth, love, dynamism. Do not fall for the postmodern trick of truth translations as building of truth. A model is not beautiful because she is a model, she is a model because she is beautiful. Decadence lets you get away with falsity, and though this phenomenon is true, the falsity will never be true. We all know. Anyhow, the theory should be used to isolate the reality of relations and pragmatically solve issues that arise from unclear communication. We all live though some filter, inwardly and outwardly construing information, but if we allow for the stripping of interactions into necessitated actions, then we can delineate true intent and solve confrontations more efficiently, but let that not be some robotic end, Tommy. The theory was not intended to serve as fuel for your disillusionment with humanity, it has been fierce enough for long enough already. There is way more than just my theory at play. Gravity is true is much truer than Newton's truths, right? A can of milk is way more than an oblique reference of a thing as thing. The truth is like lightning, maximally true and then causacious of reverberatory truths. You know you're lightning enough to be a human experiencing space and time, don't you, Tommy? He replied instantly. My pride was so easily emboldened, reassured, and then lost. It was also ineffectual. The fragility of my identity is shameful. For this reason, my truth has been dancing within my protective borders for so long. From the moment I had the ability to hide myself within my intellect, I have. Everything, my whole life has been a fearful anxiety, a feeling like I'm never enough, waiting for a question for someone to find out the real me and I have to run or answer so that they can run for my answer, me, awaiting God to reveal the trick being played on me, that my feeling of valuelessness, awfulness, compounded awfulness from my valuelessness, my growing ineptitude, that all of it has been the actual truth, my life translating by causacious lightning reverberating into a mother that resents me and experiences that just keep showing me why. All we have to do is live, we get to experience this splendorous life, be in love of life, be in love, but the whole time I have just been trapped in fear and forced to live by force, the truth, unfolding from elementary parts for my people. We have to live this period, this time and space, my generation of crushed mice in an end-state experiment. Utopia feels like death. Using my acuity, I have avoided almost all confrontation, disjointing reality, uncomfortable growth, and real vulnerability. All because why must be rediscovered and live true, and true to just be. For us to just be, we have to constantly chew the tough end of the truth stick. Even before my inglorious evening, before the harbor, I was like this. The world has always been too much for me. Thus, my filter has been so thickened and clogged, I couldn't even reveal the intentions or truths of my own actions. Do not think that my use of a negative example, to embolden your theory, serves to represent my dismay. I am celebrating the coherence of human realities, your shining, beginning to change argument. I have been in a pool of guilt for years, trying to hide from my own tangled humanity. No longer in submission to hidden feelings distorting my desires, or fear of these desires as corruptions to the very structures rendered usable to analyze them, I have finally been able to use your theory to uncover my own truth through action. I can finally break through the buildup of my own filter. Objectivity, it is the loveliest gift. I am grateful to be grateful. Happy with that clarification, I smiled and thanked him. Once again surprised by my own satisfaction with his approval, I then dulled my response slightly, wondering too why I did that. Fidgeting with his hands, reminding me of my own recently healed hand, Tommy added to his announcement, saying, "There is good and bad in all of us, I always knew this. For the first time in a long time, I hope I never give up on the good. Rather, I know now that there is a possibility for blossoming benevolence over darkness. So much of life's suffering is stripped away with this view. Like a smoldering steel scythe slices slim slabs of spread, I sever dark truth's fallacious security. Lovely is the density of communication. We can finally interact clearly with the world through this lens, straight to the sediment. No longer are we subject to selfishness or selflessness. We are free from our unjust judgment. Interactions are beneficial or not. This now is clear and predictable, for or against self and or all in this space and time." I saw that Tommy found great liberation from his own hateful heart through the utilization of my theory. It became clear, through the immediacy of his rejoicing rebuttal and his emphatic, joyful outcry, that he had long been condemned by the instability of his value system. He had always been unsteadily convincing himself of his own goodness by way of commitment to crafting people's judgments of him, perfection impossible. Living for others' approval, attempting to shed the intrinsic shame of his selfish desire, he had been forced to perpetually masquerade as a thoughtful man. He never truly felt that wholeness though. He had such an emptiness from the polarity of his actions and thoughts. The integration of my thought process had obviously come to him with such a boom because finally he was able to relax into his own mammalian desires without guilt. Additionally, aside from his morality's antagonistic appeasement, the desires his thoughtful truthfulness had been revealing had been shown to be actually genuinely harmless, not evil, non-enacted thought as thought. I read through all of him with such empathy, mirror neurons flamed up. He was so much like me. Noticing my acceptance of an elation from his delight, he continued exploring what it all meant to him. Continuing, he declared, "It is an awesome indicator of value systems also. No longer entangled by the webs we cast around ourselves, we can plainly perceive people, unabridged. By identifying the fluff from the firm fixtures of our brains, we can so easily feast upon the festivities of our minds. All of us are so improper, unfair, unjustifiably existing as selves, the gift of space and raw time, so lovely in impossible perfection, a single shit as sin, us as ubiquitous abuse of greater existential love, this is us all, plain, present, clear. It is so unbothersome now. No, that's not true. But it is a knowing that helps in dissolving it all, and the bothersomeness of it was all an acceptance, an equalizing acceptance from deluded into love's novel challenge for and by us all and me, damn it, me too. I get to the acceptance of allowance of self to be self, that Adam's fig leaf be mine too, but not I become an imp behind it, to grow and let become, to not hide in the shame of my trauma as proxy exemplification of what we all are. We are here and now, and we must all rise from the shadows of shame, our masquerading pride, know it is our pride, the damn shame of victimhood, and overcome it all into love. A victim either loves no one or accepts and loves the whole world, everyone, for the true victim knows what we are, total truth growing, knowing, we are the bleeding edge, and I choose to accept with honor, dignity, anti-pride acceptance of our fig leaf knowing perpetual novel and grander fruits, we will win, we will grow, we will love in space and time. The simplicity of it all, untapped potential for revealing growth, I love it. Just like that, Tommy had officially turned his dopaminergic rush of exuberance into the most satiating serotonin saturation for me. I felt so pleased with the installment of my thoughtfully mapped program into his mind, easing the intense randomness of his young adulthood. He had truly been in such a debilitating drought for so long. The revelry of his revolution, catalyzed by my theories, sent shivers up my sacrum. The right side of my body microquaked like the TV static of a beatific soda commercial, crackling, had cornered me with pins and needles pummeling pump push percolating effervescence, irradiant mute muffle dust starshine as spooning succulent spike spring pin cushion me flushing me heat as tingles. I painlessly placed a smile on my mouth, settled myself down from my joyful elevation, and asked, if you are at it for long enough, do you think yourself able to differentiate selfishness and self-love? I think that I may be close to an approximation of this difference. I know one thing for sure, selfishness seems not to be a symptom of self-love, rather a signifier of its dysfunction. For instance, each introspective thought is inherently tilted negatively, the empirical truth is clear. This distinction is one of the more important ones. It has taken me hours to understand and categorize the differences, but I am still not able to entirely compile a stable synthesis. What do you make of my distinction? We both intently thought for a moment, racing for an accurate abstraction. Beating me to conception, he said, promulgated, your transactional theory. Selfishness is inherent within all of us. Each transaction must benefit us in some way. This is extraordinarily consistent and true. The common terms, selfish or selfless, are gestalt indicators of the level of abstraction and places of value of someone's truth as action as judgments, evaluations. Within our prefrontal cortex, and its development of a morally sound structure, is where these terms are reflected. It is the values and morals that shift our inevitable continuum of self-service into a long-term and communally beneficial or short-term and socially destructive set of transactions. In the analysis of this phenomenological perspective, absolute human truth can finally prevail. I have applied this to many areas of my mind. These include feelings, actions, and interpersonal relationships. It has not failed yet. Surprised again, I sat and pondered the accuracy of his distinction. He had seemingly smacked the nail on its head, driving his decisive nuance through to the floorboards of truth, piercing the hardwood of exuberant aggrandizement such as this sentence has been. It was overwhelmingly wonderful to see Tommy's bright mind unfold, given the freedom of dialogue to convert the complexity of his consciousness into conciseness. From his pain, he was finally able to synthesize commendable and intricate moral fibers. After some time and actual self-love, I knew that Tommy could eventually weave those fibers together. I hoped that he could craft himself a functioning system of working prosperity. I knew that Tommy's will to power, once well woven and combined with his inevitably ensuing ethical exoneration, would unleash all of him. What he portrayed, his message, was a far cry from many other philosophical renderings of the world. There was no sense of Pharisaic or imperious impetuses either. He had no intention of distinguishing himself through his thoughts. All of the introspective thinkers that I had always come to know and to have known maintained lives of constant, maddened dashes to distinction. Tommy, on the distant disparate banks of the contrary, stayed in and made his moments only to understand himself as to be understood, first by others as a technicality, not the whole point. For all our time together, Tommy hadn't been arrogant, he had been desperate. It became clear to me how opaque his direction had become. Throughout his life, he had lost all that meant something to him. He had been stripped of his faith, love, and kinship, thus, his right to hope, passion, and connection had been stolen. What remained in the wrecked aftermath of such a life was a young man who was unable to see clearly. That was Tommy. A man who had fallen completely out of grace with the world, and thus himself. Feeling his pain and only desiring to alleviate his suffering, my feminine temperament erupted in speech. I finally fell into its compulsion, saying, if we listen to Erich Fromm's discussion of love, we can understand the monumental achievement that is non-egoic self-love. Fromm discusses how the world is a place of unity and harmony, only categorized as separate through our perception. Using people selfishly implies a prejudiced understanding of the world, and from this same abstraction, one includes, hence judges, oneself from under this same umbrella. This directed focus on the utility of others deems life unworthy if unproductive. Inextricably true also is that the judger's life, when it falls from utility, meets the same fate. It is impossible to love a part of humanity, the self, if one is unable to love the whole of humanity, or existence. You, my boy, have fallen out of love with the world, and thus yourself, and thus your future. Better will come when you allow yourself to fall back in love with the world. The absence of a mother's love causes one to seek forever in a masculine way to become whole without balance. The absence of fatherly love causes one to seek forever in a femchaotic way to become whole without balance. Love as we experience it acts as the proxy for totality consciousness touched, flowered, flowing most unrestrained by limitation through us, who we are, hence, without love humanly properly flowered, one is forever insecure with the foundation of existence itself, humanity being, it is a brutalization of a life, that not knowing, that missing love, distance from God, trust issues with God, imbalance, trauma, fight, hurt, and maybe, just maybe, overcoming it all into the greatest of love. Flowering ever constantly reknown. Understanding immediately, in the most instinctual way, Tommy wriggled slightly in his seat. It was ever present, the discomfort coursing throughout his mind, a revolt. He panicked, pleading, how do I find this? With whom do I speak and to where do I go? How do I recover this lost art? My mind is already so broken, I am so broken. Where is the escape? No, there is no escape. I no longer search for such things. I need you to show me. I continued on about love as the last tendrils of his disdainful despairing physically finished their dissolution by dissonance, raw. Desiring momentarily only his enlightenment on the subject, in the purest spirit of brotherly love I had ever come to know, I eventually softened my tone further and said, where you find nothing, you must hope for something. Your attitude must be swung positively. Your heart, one of many disjointed but connected hearts, must be filled once more with the goodness of the world. It takes time and faith. Unfortunately, you must have true faith and then test against it and be tested by it. Definitionally, this is the truest quality of faith. You must remember that all the beings of this world are of you and me too. Through this understanding, you can learn to forgive others and, in turn, forgive yourself. True love is a perspective change, not an experience. One does not love another, one is love realized through another, home remade in our special ways. Love is a constant experiential re-establishment of trust that our limitation of separation is just that, a part of the wholeness, a necessary form to this existence, not the whole thing, from self to more in space and time too. You must fall back in love with the world, with life, with hope, with love, and with yourself. Tommy agreed fully by simply saying, I almost know these things to be true, almost. I have felt this way for some time, but the true description of it all has too totally slipped from my grasp. My longing for connection is inherent, it is all of me wanting to become just that, a state of allness as a something aligned. What I have fabricated is the distinctive perspective, the rigid self, but it is just the rocket fuel to launch love. I am ready to be the triumphant forever perpetual that is the transition from perspective to the true ubiquity of truth. There is so much now with which I must fall in love. Lovely, thank you. We moved quickly into silent rumination again, looking at each other as one, connected finally through understanding. Something still remained though. I boxed it from my mind as I felt the love that we had formed for one another dance gleefully in our minds, too raw to express with words. Suddenly though, our unspoken elephant sneezed and wobble-thud. I had been pining to share my story of quiet spying. I wanted to tell him about my sighting of him outside of the office, but I didn't. I needed him to know that I had seen him, broken his privacy by anonymity at the flea market that one morning. It was rather interesting, the way we had interacted without him realizing. I had felt him there well before noticing him properly. Searching for my beloved navel oranges, fresh from Florida, I stood at my auspicious citrus stand, filled with contemplation. I wondered, how could a thoughtful man such as me be so enraptured by a simple treat? Could all my steady-state spite, my fractured trust, my victimhood, my war against consciousness here and now, could all the violent melancholy be that simply that which splits my consciousness from God and fragments it into anxious multiplicity named truth all the time, title warrior unanchored as the storm too, the love too, as to be instantly lulled away when my mind ceases its active convincing of itself, myself, me of its own must be misery. As my joie d'orange climaxed into hyperconscious crash, dissipated into the very heat, visualized by cartoon lines in my mind then and then as thought and then as thought of thought over and over, hot, vibratory black squiggly lines of black heat, hot to the touch, that mute burst into my instant depression of everything caused and effectant by and by waste the silly body of mine in the stinking heat, the sweaty heat, the balmy heat of it all, the weight of flesh that hangs from me as the sun swallows me whole like a reddening orange myself, but no, sweet sweat exists not but in the imagination fancy of some sex shop somewhere cold. I became hesitant, the standman patiently offering me a sumptuous sample slice. There was a sensation that seemed to originate in my stomach, someone was transfixed into me, I could feel it. I looked up from the oranges, and I saw Tommy, gazing off into the sunset. He was in the market for some strawberries, his mouth stained slightly red from the smeared sampler's sales pitches, I supposed. It took him a long-drawn breath to choose between his purchases, taking meaningful stretches of conscious indecision to decide between the infinitesimally differentiated punnets of fruit. Tommy stood at the stand for some time, his totality finally in glorious fullness. That damn Florida sun, beaming and hot, illuminated all of Tommy's features. Tommy was a rather powerful young man. Though slender, he was not weak. For any physical ineptitude Tommy maintained, there was plenty silently exuded charm with which he could reinflate his prowess. He was of rather average build, and reasonably tall, which perfectly blended him into the background. He was an enigmatic creature, curiously unenthused by the others around him, uninterested in the normality that punctuated his existence. He stood on, fully enthralled with the task he had chosen. His direct focus was so passionately pursued by each rendition bite of universe tasted. My boy, my son in the sun, burning bright and untouched by the whole world, if only for a moment and a memory, with me, forever. With his face low from body bowed, almost buried within the confines of his seated solace, a couple behind him encroached on his space and began identifying their most new treasured quantities to be theirs, eyeing and smelling out the most perfect produce. Their approach and landing were a misguided and badly executed process set, perhaps perfect, as Tommy's comfort was of course of least concern to them, lessons bundled into them as irate-rousingly as always. It is the indifference that tears at and into you, I watched him think before he noticed them, the harsh layering of life disguised as some people. When the man and woman approached, totally overlooking Tommy's occupancy, Tommy glared at them indirectly, shifting his vision to the periphery of his eyes and staring at their inept rendition of indecision. Eventually, after analyzing the two intruders from the translucence of his periphery and nasal ridge's blur, sidewinder named sight, the open and the half-closed by blocked, the log of concrete nose, he turned to see them in all their not even full, spit with distaste sad, anti-glory. He remained so arbitrarily unnoticeably uncomfortable, picking up the bundle of his berries, paying, and trying to move on without further grief. The enamored patrons were unaware of the discomfort that had ensued. As he walked away, he stopped and looked starkly at the two. He was clearly encumbered by the socially unacceptable behavior he had witnessed. It seemed to all mean so much to him, irrevocably important, as if his interaction, he, represented all that was directly and indirectly impacted by the injustice of their rudeness. In his distant eyes flame danced all ancestors, Nile red. The universal imbalance screamed and scratched and tore at his throat, a desire for restoration of harmony like a vile spike from an into spine. They had simply stood too close, edging out Tommy. Though unmoved to confronting action, he had been highly disjointed by the whole thing, losing track of his fascination with the fruit. The densities of stars implode with less vigor than his internalization and spite materialization, from brightness to dark right standing. He stood. After some time spent just beyond the invisible but understood border of the impermanent structure as stand, saturating the small store outdoors with surreptitious sourness, Tommy moved on to a distant distance. I followed, hoping to maybe quell his evident dissatisfaction. As I walked towards Tommy, wanting to identify all the problematic preconditions from which he had drawn his most hateful non-confrontation. As I reached the two boozing blunderers though, still at the strawberry stand, it seemed as though they had no sense of what had occurred around them. The two transgressors had missed Tommy completely. It was as if he didn't exist. I was expecting some reactionary emission from them, towards my own glaring, my staring, indirect confrontation, but Tommy's and my invisibility proved more potent than their perception. I carefully analyzed them with the same disposition of immovable indignation. The reality of the situation quickly became clear upon closer inspection. The unfair unease of all the people around the drunkards had a bitter bite. Their dried, red skin was of undeniable distinction. Like an infected set of monkeys, they disturbed the peace of the market, bothering all the sellers and buyers. There was a distinct darkness to them, a disjointed sadness emanated from them. Like two lurking lepers, they infiltrated each new place and spread their distasteful disdain for existence. I quickly understood the proceeding I had witnessed from Tommy, his own truly great openness to change those individuals, and their own lacklusterness, their dust-buster mud thrower mighty as might against him force unified by their shared scorn for sobriety. He had iterated, understood, and processed the alterable future and knew that an engagement in their trivial transgression was pointless. It was not that they had been disrespectful or unthinking, rather, it was that they had been under the same illusion of their alcohol-fueled escapism superiority for some time, and he knew it. He was sad for them and angry with existence, his name for such truth. As I stepped where Tommy had stood, his acumen became clear, and my projective neuroticism even louder than clear in my ears, whining and thumping, popping and creaking. I looked around for Tommy. He had vanished. Like a mouse, he had disappeared into the crowd, indistinctly blending into the mass. I searched for the young man to no avail. His memory soon became the most tangible trace of his existence. I had wanted to share my thoughts on his interaction and praise his discernment for justice. I had wanted to tell him how strong he was in his decisive inaction. I had wanted to share my understanding of his worldly view of the two. Tommy stood for something greater than the small infractions of existence. He understood that the problematic pair needed more guidance than he could offer through correction. He knew their time for retribution was coming. I had been so ready to chastise his cowardice and internalization, but now I was ready to explode with praise. He solely stood for one purpose. He had been there to bear witness to the credibility of their clear corruption. It had been an acceptance. I was so proud of his powerful silence. My micro-muse remembrance snapped fissure free, ripped close did my portal to past made present, between us, as he coughed. Back in the office again, I wanted to match his truth, as it was then, with a questioning that remained close in abstraction but unspecific in closeness. I wanted to tell him that I had understood him at that my-post moment. I knew why he had been so movingly immobilized. While the temptation to ingratiate him for his strength persisted, I was overcome with the impetus to remain silent on the direct matter. I felt that admitting to my watchfulness would only serve to create more distrust and general suspicion. I felt an aura of unwanted monitoring would serve to taint all that we had accomplished. My own cowardice explained it to me just like that as the session ran on. I did eventually portray my message through my planned alternate flattery, asking for his opinion. In a world filled with diabolical urges, I just more than whispered, what keeps one from allowing those urges to be emboldened by actions? He smiled at me and understood the message. The fault of our actions, he eventually responded, may be blamed on countless previous, present, or pre-to-be problems or people. The chain of adverse eventualities that results from other negative potentialities is infinitely long. Each link is one new extrapolation of the same monotony. We can, and most will, easily allow the chain to wrap us up like some salivating serpent, binding us with our own past. Alternately, we can, and few will, tactfully evade the heavy chain charmer and use the bewitching beast in each of us to guide us through the future. The most powerful of us can use us, the colossus creature, to pass safely through the dangers of the future. When I see a couple of high hooligans, for example, I see this as an opportunity for growth. I can either allow their disgraceful behavior to sour my day, or I can simply understand that they are wrapped. This is all true insofar as my cowardice is not corrupting me. Nonetheless, approximating impossible, their escape from the snake seems unthinkable. Let that be why you do the harder thing at all, not for your own pride or for your cowardice, but for the love of all things as true with or without these selves of ours, that we are all some sort of one thing figuring out all of these things too. He took a moment to tacky touch and squeeze his own arms and skin and so forth, and then gestured and looked as directions to follow his eyes, seen all about. I asked recently, he continued, how do I avoid this entangled outcome for myself? Suddenly, the focus shifted away from my anger, generally, and onto the objective truth. Once the objectivity climaxes in utility, I return inwardly to build upon my skillful interpretation of my surroundings and conduct within the world. I hope that Tommy's hooligans comment was a referential coincidental anecdotal fragment and smiled. With no contestation, I agreed, and we began finishing the session. I asked, any final words? He immediately became rather aggravated, losing his posture and wriggling around anxiously. It was as though he had been forced by my concluding words to accept the end of his quest with no end. He had been clearly hoping for some miraculous non-closure in the same way a boy plays his games before bedtime. He was no boy anymore. Before he could answer, I said, immensely thoughtful people almost always fill their lives with goodness. A wholesome and robust moral framework is inherently important to them. Any flexibility in the framework allows for their dexterous mind to slip through the cracks and create chaos. With stern rigidity, you may find immense joy. It must all be brought on consciously and voluntarily. I have pushed you hard, but now it is time for you to continue growing and changing without me. Do not lose yourself in the confinements of your framing. You deserve to be who you will become. Remember that. He looked around the room and breathed a full breath. He was pulling everything from his last moments in the office. The slight musk of the office's continual usage, the dull luminescent bulbs of my upper walls, the warmth of our connection, the hum of my monitor behind him, the taste of bitter growth, he was taking it all in. We had both become so different and he knew it. He didn't say anything, unable to encapsulate what it all meant. It was the closure of the beginning of his adventure. He conveyed one final message clearly to me, saying, I think you know what we have done here. Thank you. We hugged, shook hands, and tried for an emotionally balanced exit. Before he took his last step out of the doorway, he turned around. His face seemed different for some reason. He stared back at me like he was going to add something. It seemed too important to miss. Please, what is it? I asked. He remained focused on me, face intangibly different. Then, he turned and left, nothing more to say. I returned home rather troubled that evening. It had been such a remarkably tough period for the two of us. Like some solemn sea, the ebb and flow of each meeting paired so uncomfortably with the battle of wits, but there was something so inherently important between us. It was all in those moments, those unexplainably compelling disagreements about the simplicities of life, usually assumed mundane. They had been like the indifferent tidal programs of Poseidon, the consistent divergence of thought and reclamation to the central truth of it all. He had been much more than a client to me. I smiled while thinking of the boundless potential that lay ahead of Tommy. Only slight correction of hyper-inward thinking, allied with his continuation of trauma healing, was going to grant him the strength to do great things, gifting unto the world an incredible man. As I lay in my bed that night, my slick skin seemed to swirl with fever. I couldn't believe the disastrous guilt that still plagued me. I felt as though there was still more for me to do with him. Though we had beaten back his blunders and bolstered his benevolence, I had become heartbroken for him. I had begun to understand and love Tommy like my own child. I wanted nothing more than to fill him with all the admiration he could manage, nursing him back to the stunning soul he had been before the world had eaten him. From the heights of empathetic pound-heartedness, I had grown a gloriously clean crown. The adornment I had manifested only fit one head. I continued sweating, adding intermittent writing about my problematic position to my journal. Though I had completed a task unfathomable for most, helping Tommy, we had simultaneously, necessary as it had been to do so, crumpled many precepts I had held so dear. The thoughts of my ineptitude in the primary sessions lambasted me. The defiant deafness of my original understanding of Tommy, so clearly callous now, made me more and more ashamed throughout the night. Above all that, I was waiting for my next unwelcome guest, the man-lapelled Ju. I hadn't sighted him yet. I knew he was coming for me. I wondered if my heart was going to explode from mere anticipation. My mind couldn't take it. I eventually arrived, crestfallen, at my slumber's entrapment. I dreamed of little things and thanked God that I had no visitor when I arose the next morning. I journaled most of the next day away, painting between and upon note-taking and notes, sparing small squares of time for multitudinous ventures of thoughtfulness into practical problems. Perfused with thought, I sat for the next couple of days until my new session with Frank Hahn, my long-standing therapist, finally arrived. Tommy had truly captivated me, and now it was my time to learn, grow, and expand with the same hope I held for Tommy. I knew my very own growth path lay clearly but painfully ahead. I took the next few days to write about the impact of such an amazing young man. Troubled and tormented as he was, and though his heart remained restless, there was much hope for him yet. I felt a burning, and almost caustic power, connecting me to him. Neurality named voice suddenly struck, lightning truth. Inexplicably glorious as the message was in my mind, I needed to approximate it with words. I rushed to pen and paper to write a letter to myself, describing what it all had meant to me. In the letter, I wrote the following: Thomas, no longer Tommy, has earned his unabridged name. He is a man of great quandary and isolated pain. A man of lost vision yet indifferent virtue, he enigmatically remains. Somewhere, he roams around the world, finding his way back home. I know not of his defeat, only of his triumph with many valleys. Against the darkness of his own heart, and the crushed victory of his youth, he remains. I wish him nothing but steady waters within his journey. He has truly grown, and I alongside him. The things I have seen throughout my time with him can only be described as harrowing. With all the trouble he has brought, I can only thank him. Within the time span in which our tangled souls met and learned, from our overgrown consciousnesses and our undernourished virtue, we have emerged bold and new.